what is Stellar?
Thanks for asking. Hey everyone. Stellar is an L1 blockchain. We've been around since 2014, really focused on real-world utility, equitable access, and one of the things I think that are great about Stellar is that you really have real-world product market fit today. We're seeing communities in Colombia receive payments in USDC on Stellar. We're seeing aid disbursements in Ukraine being dispersed to Stellar wallets. Just this year, we've seen health workers in northwestern Syria get their payroll on Stellar. All of this is enabled by this global network of on and off ramps we call the Anchor network. And probably the most dominant one is MoneyGram, and you can go in and out of USDC on Stellar in more than 400,000 locations around the world through MoneyGram.
Wow, incredible, incredible. I feel like this is a narrative that has started to come up in other ecosystems outside of Stellar, but you guys, we're longtime partners with Stellar too, and have been really, really pushing some of these different things for a really, really long time. And so, one thing that we oftentimes see is that with product market fit, there are symptoms of success. Sometimes those symptoms are security related, right? You rarely have successful fintech products without some levels of fraud. You rarely have, successful social media platforms without some levels of abuse. So Tomer, how do you think about security and securing the Stellar ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think maybe we can talk about two separate things. One of them is kind of like how do we ensure that the product and tech stack lends itself well for security, and the other is how do we work with our ecosystem, and maybe we can even touch on some fun fraud stories in the Stellar ecosystem. And so I think from a product tech perspective, Stellar has really been focused on building something secure from the ground up. So if you look at the protocol, for example, even the consensus protocol itself really values reputation in order to secure the network, which is very different from some of the other consensus mechanisms we see out there. And if you're spending any time on Twitter recently, you're seeing that there's a lot of kind of like voices that are doubting proof of stake networks, and maybe it's kind of like just this unnecessary complexity that eventually leads to basically choosing reputable parties. And so we can do this more directly, and that's what the Stellar Consensus Protocol does. Another thing is that we have these like built-in tokens in the Stellar Protocol. So rather than going and deploying your own smart contract, we have these efficient built-in tokens with allow lists, deny lists, clawbacks. All of these are optional. And so as an issuer, you really have all the toolbox that you need to build a secure ecosystem. And just last year, we launched Soroban, which is our new smart contract platform. And we really focused on building something that is secure from the ground up. For example, reentrancy obviously is not allowed by default, which is crazy that networks are still launching with that nonsense in 2025. And we really built for testability from the ground up. So if you built on Soroban, you know that test-driven development is really the way to go. And we have very sophisticated unit testing, local testing, integration testing, fuzz. We've worked with Certora on building formal verification for the ecosystem. So there's everything you need to build secure from the ground up is there. With that said, that's probably not enough, right? Because you actually need you need auditors in the ecosystem. You need security experts in the ecosystem that are helping build these secure systems. And so one of the things we've done is establish an audit bank with, hey, I could just keep talking. Hey. So one of the things we did is build this audit bank, which is a group of auditors that we work with. Some of them are in the audience here. Hey, AutoSec. And so these auditors, we basically sponsor a first audit for at least one audit for every protocol that launches on Stellar and matches a specific criteria. And so and all the DeFi that's on Stellar right now is secured by that. And then I think the other aspect is kind of like where the rubber meets the ground, which is the front ends and the UIs, and how to give these people tools for building secure system and for kind of like real-time fraud analysis. And I think that, have you heard of this company called Blockade?
Tell me more.
Sure. So, obviously the wallet is the touch point, and what we want to do, and you can tell us how you do it, but we want to help users really understand in real time what they're signing, because a lot of the power of crypto comes with a lot of responsibility, because you just can't undo things. You can't call a credit company, say, hey, actually, maybe I shouldn't have done this, signed this payment. So, how are you guys securing the Stellar ecosystem?
Awesome. So I think for those who haven't heard about Blockade, a good way to think about the tech we've built is this ability to determine if transactions are malicious or not, right? And there's a lot of different things you can do with that. And there's a lot of different things that make a transaction malicious or not, right? One of those, and one kind of key area that probably most of us have played with, because I assume most people actually haven't written smart contracts, not yet anyways. And so is interacting with different dApps, is interacting with different wallets, with different interfaces. And so really what one of the kind of use cases and core use cases we have is looking at a transaction, it's simulating it, it's validating it, it's determining if it's malicious or not for a whole bunch of different reasons. There's other use cases, of course, but that's kind of a core one. And I think when you talk about security, the way that we think about it is generally we kind of split and segment the world into two, right? One is what we call kind of high value, low volume incidents, things that happen very rarely, but usually most of us have heard about them on the news. And then we segment it into another category, which is what we call low value, high volume incidents, right? Things that happen all the time, and probably none of us have heard of any of them. Or we've unfortunately encountered some of them ourselves, or have heard people, or sometimes we see complaints by users on different forums and stuff like that. But generally, these things go kind of unspoken. And so we've been working with our friends at SDF and the broader community, as well as other communities, to really come in and prevent these cases of the latter kind of cases that we talked about, right? The ones that go unmentioned, and maybe you could mention a little bit more about some of them today. Yeah.
So I think. Like you said, everyone hears about the big things, about the Bybits, about Cetos and the Sui ecosystem not so long ago, but what we're seeing in the crypto ecosystem as a whole, not just Stellar, is that there's a real plague of fraud, and like you said, it's kind of like low value, high volume, and so we're seeing a lot of these, and so because crypto makes it so easy to build permissionless financial innovation, bad guys are also doing this, right? So the fact that you can go on a permissionless chain, issue a token, create a market, like a sell-side market for it immediately without any permission, and go on Telegram or on 4chan or wherever you want and start spreading the news, then we're seeing a lot of that resulting in fraud. A lot of it is kind of like in these nascent communities around the world. We've seen in the US it happen around, funny enough, around conspiracy theory circles. And unfortunately, we've seen criminals utilize some of the aspects of these communities in order to or do fraud in these ecosystems, and I think that this is, like you said, we don't talk about this enough, and it's a shame, because we should be, because we need to solve this. And I think that ever since introducing Blockade to the Stellar ecosystem, which is I think almost a year now, and live on 4 wallets, I want to say.
Yeah, I think 4 wallets.
Okay, yeah. And we've definitely seen really great numbers from these wallets about reduction in fraud. Obviously, the more adoption this industry gets, the more we'll see fraudulent activity. It comes with the territory, and so we really need to be mindful, work with security experts, and mitigate these.
Very, very cool. I think that it doesn't only touch on, and this is oftentimes we even forget about this at Blockade ourselves, but a benefit of some of the things that we do is when you think about it, like generally in crypto, right? You mentioned this kind of a permissionless financial innovation and how it enables a lot of these different things. So you have this long tail of hacks, but you also have this like long tail of like user mistakes, right? Just before here, we were mentioning memos, right? For example, right? A feature that some of you from the audience love at Stellar. And so, I think some of the things that we should also be thinking about more is not just the kind of security elements, but also more along the lines of just like preventing users from using foot guns, right?
Yeah.
If you right, it's like you have this really really powerful tool that can let you send money anywhere in the world without asking anyone any questions, and bad people can use it for granted. We can also make mistakes with it too.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So very very cool. For those that don't know, right, Tomer owns product at Stellar, and so I think a lot of us in the audience, and me especially, want to know kind of what's on the roadmap, what's kind of next for Stellar, and what does that mean for security?
Sure. I'll tell you what's next, and then I'll ask you what it means for security. Okay. So, obviously we put out a roadmap earlier this year. There's a lot of focus on kind of like usability and scalability of the Stellar network. I think one really big topic that we're about to put out a paper about, and maybe this is the first time I'm saying this in public, but we're really putting strong emphasis on privacy. And I think from talking with users and mostly from talking with institutions, what we're seeing is that between the kind of like, a bit more regulatory certainty that we're seeing in the States and a lot of TradFi institutions coming into crypto, we're seeing that privacy is starting to get a lot of attention. And so in order to get really meaningful adoption, in order for institutions to be sure that, they're not sharing all their secrets on chain in order to make sure that they are, complying with whatever regulation is in their industry and in their region, we need to just introduce some privacy preserving protocols, and we need to do that in a way that still allows for compliance. And so, various kind of like admin functionality, association sets, not association sets, and there's kind of like a lot of approaches for this. And so we've, at Stellar, are both working with our ecosystem on some of the building blocks for this, mostly around zero-knowledge cryptography, but also other technologies. And we're also directly supporting building these type of privacy-preserving protocols as prototypes right now. And so I think an interesting question for you is, a lot of what you do relies on looking at kind of like clear, transparent, on-chain activity. What does a company like Blockade do in this new world of privacy? Is there something you can do, or are we all fucked?
Great question. So I think we do a lot of Blockade, right? We talked about these incidents that are high value, low volume, and there's these incidents that are very much the opposite of that, right? Low volume, high volume. When we talk about the former, at least, right, the position that we're placed in the ecosystems that we engage with, and the wallets that we work with, or other interfaces that we work with, is oftentimes in a position where we can see some information, right, even in a fully private environment, right. Obviously, you want to inform us where you're sending your transaction, what contact you're interacting with, things like that. And so, when we think about it in a world where all of a sudden the on-chain data is gone, right? You don't really have that ability to understand, what is this contract, what is that reputation, how does it look like, things like that. I think it actually makes solutions like ours even more valuable and even harder to build. Just because you do need some kind of reputation for these things. You do need some kind of visibility and data into what's going on, and if a user has interacted with this thing in the past, and if so, how many, and how does it look like, and what's it going to affect, and how is it going to affect that user's balance, and things like that. And so I think for at least like I said, right, the kind of incidents that go unmentioned, then ultimately it's good for Blockade, and I think we're building in a way that's aligned with that too.
That's awesome, and I do think one of the cool things about Blockade compared to some of the other solutions out there is that there is kind of like a strong emphasis on off-chain signal and kind of like trying to figure out what's going on chain, not only by on-chain activity, but also kind of like scanning the internet and trying to figure out what's going on. So like from your perspective, obviously you've been, I think you one of the most like premier services for doing this type of like transaction monitoring. What is next for Blockade?
Well, privacy. But beyond privacy, I think more specifically, so like I said in the beginning, the core tech of what we're building is this engine that's able to detect if transactions are good or bad, right? And one key use case that I think you and many others are familiar with is like, okay, great, protecting consumers, from bad actors, from themselves. And so generally, like we call that like product line of Blockade, end user protection, right? How do we go and kind of prevent these things from happening, whether that's detecting malicious tokens, transactions, dApps, and stuff like that. But there's a lot more we can do with that, right? One of those, for example, is detecting these more so kind of high value, low volume incidents that we talked about, right? Like some of these really, really big exploits, right? So for example, you mentioned CEDAS, for example, protocol kind of on SUI that was hacked for a couple $100 million a couple weeks ago. We kind of say that like it's nothing in this industry, but it's crazy, right? And so we worked very, very closely like with the SUI Foundation to detect that, to work to mitigate that, and kind of triage that, recover a lot of it. They were able to recover about $160 million.
Can I ask you a question about that?
You can. I don't know if I can answer.
So I do think we talked to a lot of players in the ecosystem, and I think that specific hack was really interesting because of the way this was mitigated, and because kind of like this activation of the validators themselves. Like, what do you think other ecosystems should learn from this incident? Is this kind of like a like a rarity, or should we actually start like preparing for a universe in which like validators actually utilize their theoretical right to govern, which doesn't happen a lot, right, actually. So what are you thinking about this universe?
So it's a good question. It's a spicy question, right? I think
Why?
Because I think the community was this could have gone in two ways, right? One way, the community could have said, "Oh my God, you guys are censoring the network," right? Another way where this could have gone is, "Oh my God, you're using your right to govern to protect the network," right? And I think so obviously our approach is aligned with what ended up happening, which is this is like a positive thing. I think there's other networks with other values, with other kind of forms of history that this would not necessarily have been a good thing, right? I think if Bitcoin validators would have all colluded to stop a certain transaction happening, we would all be like, oh my God, right? But I think there's evolution of a chain. There's context that is associated with that, where that enables that. And I think generally it highlights like one really, really interesting thing about crypto, which is this form of governance, right? That I think decentralized coordination and the ability to make decisions at that speed is something I think a lot of us don't actually think is possible, right? And so because of that, we look at it sometimes in the eye of like, okay, great, this is centralized, right? Because we don't think like a decentralized community can actually coordinate and make these decisions like in real time. And I actually think like as people, we think that because that's kind of how our governance works. Like nothing fast happens in DC, right? Nothing fast happens, generally anywhere where kind of governance is a factor, except for in crypto.
Yeah, and I think we've been telling ourselves this lie to us in the ecosystem about these permissionless networks, but actually there are entities that are responsible for the network. They're trust minimized, so it's not one entity. And so I actually think, I know they got a lot of shit for doing this governance thing. I'm all in favor of governance. I think that's awesome. But I do think it is worth kind of questioning what is governance and what does that look like for any network. And if a validator is making a decision, and these validators can make decisions that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, who are these validators? No one fucking knows who these validators are. Except in a network like Stellar, where it's based on reputation. So, yeah, Stellar's awesome.
Stellar's awesome. So So you mentioned privacy and some of these bigger. That's important for a lot of these different funds and institutions. We hear this too, also, right? Oftentimes, I think privacy and security obviously go hand in hand. And so when we talk to some of the largest institutions that are either dipping their toe or fully involved, right? They're like, one of the biggest risks that we're worried about is we move some money in a position or out of a position. Our wallets are doxxed, right? There's tools like these that can do that today. And then people are like, oh my God, this thing is selling. Or what usually happens is just there's people who watch these wallets and buy and sell and trade based on these activities, right? Things that in traditional market, these are risks that in traditional markets don't exist. And so I think these core pieces of privacy will actually accelerate adoption in a way that we haven't seen before. Just again based on the conversations we're having over the past couple months. I'm curious if I think there's two ways to develop products, right? One is you kind of sit in a room, think hard, and then come out and you're like, this thing will be really, really good. And there's other ways where you talk to customers and they tell you what you want. What's bringing Stellar to do this? Is it one? Is it the other? Is it something only Tomer knows and I don't?
So here's the thing. We obviously talk to our partners and to our users. I think the challenging thing specifically in the privacy space is that everyone wants privacy. Everyone will tell you that they want privacy. Everyone will tell you that they need privacy in order to comply with the law and to maintain a competitive edge. I think that the challenging thing for us has been getting clear requirements from institutions. And so, we're talking with a lot of people, they say we want privacy, we're like, okay, we bring out our yellow pad and it's like, what are your requirements? And then they start mumbling. So I think that's challenging. And our approach right now is obviously we talk to everyone, but we are kind of taking a more proactive approach in terms of directly prototyping these solutions and offering them up to our partners and see what that works like. And obviously we're also talking with you guys, and we're talking with other folks in the compliance space, other folks in institutions that are looking to issue these. And there are a couple of protocols that we're kind of directly developing, and I think it's crypto. We like to talk about cryptography and about tech. I think the tech is pretty much there, both in terms of whether you go down the zero knowledge cryptography space, or you go TEs, or kind of fully homomorphic encryption. There's a lot of things that we can do. The question is, what are the administrative tools that we give people, and then how do we actually use them? What are the policies around who actually enforces them? Are these the issuers? Are these some third parties? Are these the validators of the network? So I think that how to actually govern these privacy solutions is probably the biggest open question that we need to figure out.
Good question. Awesome. I don't know how we are on time. Are we? We can keep going. Awesome. Okay. I'm looking through my questions here for you.
Do you want to take questions from the audience?
Yeah, we can do that.
Is there a, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
Ali?
so usually the process that happens, my voice will probably be heard. Okay, so usually the process that we see in the development in blockchain is that the blockchain builds up a feature and only then the ecosystem kind of starts working on top of that feature, especially in security stuff, right? Bitcoin didn't ask you how to build their infrastructure, they were just building it, and you had to kind of work with what's in there. Now we have the chief product officer for Stellar here on stage with a security vendor. So what can he do to make you able to get people to learn to be more secure, right? Not just in the blockchain, but when you look at the layers on top of it. He's building smart contracts right now, so that's a great playground.
Before I give the opportunity to answer, I will say that our smart contracts runtime, which was launched last year, we developed it probably for 2 whole years before launching it, and for the full year before launch, we actually had around 8 preview releases. And so we were very deep in conversations with the ecosystem, with prototypers. We made a lot of very significant changes to the runtime in order to make it, frankly, easier for developers. But also, we worked with Satora, for example, on their formal verification stuff. We worked with auditors, so even before, we had 6 or 7 auditors active in the ecosystem before the first smart contract was ever deployed on mainnet. So we definitely put a lot of emphasis on that. I think one thing that we did actually on the security front, your solution, Blockade solution, offers simulation. So one of the things that we actually did, we did kind of like we build simulation from the ground up for Stellar smart contracts, and so you don't need to go and build like specialized tools. And so someone like Ido can just show up and bring their own kind of like special sauce, which is not kind of like the technical aspect of simulation. It's more kind of like actually understanding on a deeper level the results of the simulation, understanding what's going on in the ecosystem, where's the money flow actually going, and kind of like make decisions based on that. So we were just thinking about Ido when we developed this.
Actually, I was going to mention simulation and how it's kind of natively built into Stellar. I think, Eric, to answer your question, I think like the hardest thing, and you'll probably relate for those who don't know Eric's from Fireblocks, the hardest thing probably for companies like us is I think generally like fragmentation, right? Like there's different standards across different chains, and you want to build like a solution that ultimately is not too fragmented across those different things. Some things that make it really hard, like Tomer mentioned, is like many chains don't expose features that are required for building like simulations, for example. And then the result that we go and do is like we take a node, we fork it, we figure out what to do and how to kind of make it behave in the way that we need to. And obviously that like has a ton of lift on our side to go and do that beyond all the standard stuff that you already need to do. Like indexing and kind of and applying kind of different algorithms and these kind of things. And so I think like that's like one example. I think that's like really really good. What could Tomer do to make our lives easier in the ecosystem? I think we have a lot of support, like for Zorban, for Stellar, kind of like vanilla Stellar, if that's how I'm allowed to call it. Okay, I got a nod. And so I think like now it's pretty good. But if Tomer were to ask me what I needed him to do before we did it, was probably have some native functionality for simulation, so we don't have to build it ourselves.
Questions? Okay. Shall we? Okay. Let's do this.
Tomer, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you for having me. Have a good, cool day.
Hey guys, the next